Check out this abso-effing phenomenal pass that did not count. Jason Anderson going up the inside of Dylan Ferrandis. I said on my track analysis video, somebody might be able to outbrake somebody. You'll be able to come up there, but if you just could minor overbrake somebody, you were able to do it. He also did it to Cooper Webb, and Jason was simply on fire. These were some of the best passes of the night. Him just setting this stuff up, because he easily could have taken his front wheel out at speed trying to get underneath somebody. This race and this track really promoted a lot of guys trying to square up, get up on the inside of other guys, because it was a very, very fast track. Look at him. How far he's going in there. He's just going in there with authority, braking. I'm surprised he's not even doing a stoppie coming into that corner here. We'll watch it one more time. Outside, inside, just beautifully executed. Didn't hit the tough blocks on the inside. Wow, just ass end spin right around. Such a shame that this rider was docked a position. And yes, the penalty report is not up. So how do we know? Well, I let everybody know first on the live show right after the race that he was penalized, because the provisioning results showed some session notes of him getting that penalty. And what was it for? Because there's a lot of controversy out there that why did Jason Anderson get docked a position when you had other riders and a couple rounds ago, because of the mud, go around the whoops and not get penalized? They actually took the whoops out. Well, here, this is the reason. You could say he never could have caught up to these riders as quickly if he didn't make this highway out of the whoop sections. Well, we need a little bit more context as to why potentially the officials would have done something like that. Well, if we look at the top of our screen, we can see Jason Anderson bumping with Barcia and actually, I believe, Cooper, and he goes down at the beginning of the whoop section. So what I'm guessing by the race director is that, hey, Jason crashed here as opposed to getting off the track here. You could have safely gotten back on. And did Barcia get back? I really wish that we would have seen a little bit more here, because Barcia is pushed off as well, and it didn't happen to Barcia because he's this rider right here. It's a completely double standard if Barcia ended up going all the way back there. So that I don't know with the footage. We just know that Jason went off. And it was just plain and simple, Jason being impatient, and it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission, because here's another look at it in slow-mo where he runs into the back of Cooper, and almost Barcia could have been there to keep him up. Maybe Barcia was the ultimate reason as to why he went down, because he might have been able to save it if he didn't just get knocked over by Barcia there. But I really want to know, did Barcia do the same thing, or did he get back on right at the beginning of the whoop section? Because the real implication is here. If Barcia gets back on, or if he didn't race off track, because I'm assuming Barcia just collected his breath and went around the whoops as well, where Jason, he actually accelerates off track. He's hauling butt. You see him shift a gear, lean back, and I think that is really the determining factor here of the AMA officials of saying, hey, here's the penalty, is that little shift right there. However, is it a bummer? Yeah, it's a big bummer. And Jason, yes, it's something that happened to him, but it was the position that he put himself in. And why did he put himself in a position like that? Well, it goes back to the starts. We got to look at the starts. You've got these two riders that have basically blown up the industry over the last week. You've got Jett Lawrence, who's kept very quiet, and you've got Jason Anderson, who's been pretty vocal since after the race happened. He's in the better position because he's on the inside of Jett. This is that third and final race. You want to be on the inside of somebody, because that way you have the line and you don't need to move over on somebody. You're able to push them wide. Well, as they go into this corner here, Anderson pushes the limit and runs straight into Jett. We can see it here. Watch what's happening. He's braking super hard. He's got Prado on the inside of him, which he's there just to be there. He's not going to really try to push anybody around. Anderson knows who this guy is, and he just comes off of winning the last main. So he's all hot and bothered and ready to win the overall. So he's going to push real hard into that first corner, and this ends up taking out Kenny as well. Then after that, well, now he's in the back of the pack. So what is he doing? Well, he's now pushing the issue even further, and he's trying to get around people fast because he sees that, hey, here's his rival Jett in front of him. He ends up running into the back of Cooper, just not being patient, and that ultimately is what caused him being in a position to potentially even being fined. The first reason is the fine a little silly. Yes, it is a little silly, determining that there's been other implications of other riders, aka possibly Barcia, that comes off the track here and does the same infraction, but it's up to the rider to not put themselves in those positions in order to not even get fined. I want to know what you guys think in these comments below. But here, we'll watch one more start because these two riders have gotten in with each other. And this is that second start where Jason Anderson ends up just putting on a clinic like Sexton did in the first one. And I want you to notice, what did he do? Here's Jett and here's Jason. They are lined up right next to each other, but Jett actually has the better line right here because he's on the inside of Jason. But what does Jason do? Jason gets a start, and he purposely, I want to call it Vince freeze it, but he moves over. He does it safely, but he moves over on Jett, and Jett ends up getting a bad start because of it. Simple as that. That's how these pros work, is you line up next to your rival. If you're not faster than the other rider, you want to make sure you're on the inside of that individual, and when the gate drops and you're out of the rut, and if you got the line, boom. You might not be able to beat that SOB in a main event 20 minutes long. However, you'll definitely have a better chance of beating him in a gunfight. So you get out in front, that rut ends, boom, you move over right on that guy. That guy either runs into the back of you or has to hit the brakes, and he gets a bad start. You put yourself in a good position for success. It's just a racing strategy that these guys do constantly. This track promoted riders trying to square up, get underneath each other. It made for some very good racing and hard racing. You have RJ and Levi, the last couple of corners before the finish. RJ ended up being the eventual winner. However, Levi had an opportunity to put the Husky in the cheap sheets. He knows he's much lighter than this individual, and if you are going to block pass / T-bone somebody, it's better that you hit somebody smaller than you, or you're at least a bike length in front of them to just tip over their front wheel. Because in most cases, they're not going to move, and you're going to end up tipping over. So Levi did the smart thing here by trying to block him, but RJ just accelerated, which was really good racecraft on his part, and he even better racecraft in this next corner, where he knows that the only way around to the finish line to win the race is by going underneath him, because he's got the inside. So what does he do? He stays very close, and he makes sure he doesn't get too far in front of him to where Levi is able to get underneath him and not hit his rear wheel. He stays right by him, where most riders make this mistake by getting too far in front of him, and it leaves the door open. But look at him. He's covering that front wheel to where if Levi dives down, he's going to crash. And that's ultimately what almost happened, is they come to a stop, and Levi almost tips over, almost has to put his foot down, and he ends up winning the race. Incredible heads-up racing by RJ. I don't understand this rider, that he's able to do stuff like this, but then somehow he always ends up putting himself in a bummer scenario where he gets the short end of the stick. We'll continue with the flow of this, where we have Tomac versus Sexton right here. Sexton, I'll get into it in my next video about lines, but he's trying to cover Tomac. And Tomac just gets underneath him and almost almost takes himself out. How close is that? He does the right thing by squaring him up by going far to the outside, and Sexton is trying to cover that line because he's going, hey, this line is going here. I don't want anybody getting underneath me, so I'm going to cover the line. But really what he should have done is he should have done the RJ deal where you are next to that guy and you push him wide to prevent him. But this could be a telling of the take of Sexton just wasn't really feeling it this weekend because, yeah, he gets out of control. Other than that, he might have been able to keep his line and push Tomac wide. He gets squirrely, so he's just kind of got to do what he's doing. I just think if he would have stuck into it and stayed on the outside as to try to defend the inside, he wouldn't have gotten past here. And Tomac is just able to break, then go right up underneath him and almost take himself out. There is another example of this between Joe Shimoda and Marchbanks. Joe is on the outside, and Marchbanks, again, tries to do what Sexton and RJ did by holding the line. And what does Joe do? Joe just squares it up, just like Tomac, and it works beautifully. Nice break. Use almost the tough lock as a berm and make it stick. That was one of the best passes of the entire night. Where Marchbanks shouldn't have been passed there. He should have been able to defend the line. But you've got some riders that are just better on their toes. These Triple Crowns have a funny way of showing everybody the small gaps in people's programs because they're so short of racing. You have to be consistent. You have to be fast. There's a lot of dynamic that happens between these. And what really was happening with Jett? He was coming off a week that really wasn't the best, or last couple weekends that weren't the best, and he was arguably rebounding from it fairly decently with what happened between him and Anderson. And here, this outside line in the whoops that turns into the inside. Yeah, it's fast and good because these riders, you will always see them more often than not take even a far top inside or outside line in the whoops, because in the middle, that's where you get all these weird jagged bumps and stuff. And if you can get super close to the tough blocks, it ends up being much straighter little ruts, and it gives these guys like a guideline to follow through, and it just ends up being a smoother line. That's really how we saw Eli get around Sexton, is he's just taking that nice, smooth outside line as opposed to staying in the middle where there's all that chop through the whoops. However, what really the problem is here for Jett is he gets off balanced more often than not throughout the laps because he's trying to make the inside. This isn't something where he has a straight 180-degree corner now. This is now a 90 where he's going to lose time if he doesn't stick with the inside. So his body positioning is off coming out of the whoops. Yes, he gets kicked, but he's also leaning over because he's getting ready to make an inside corner, to break. And that's all that happened there, is he's pushing the motorcycle and he's pushing inertia and physics to the breaking point, and it's going to snap it sometimes. Doesn't matter if you're super talented or if you have the best equipment, it's not going to work out every time. And we saw that exact thing happen to him here during the final lap of the third race, where he gets off-centered and ends up going down. And really, it's jumping into these whoops. Jumping into whoops are very difficult because whoops start off being real rounded, but then as riders start breaking them down, they get sharper and sharper and sharper, but then it's a big, sharp gap in the middle of them. And so if you've got real stiff suspension, that suspension's not going to want to move a whole lot, and especially if you've got a setup that's fairly soft, well, it's not going to want to compress that much, and you have riders go down. We saw RJ do the same thing on the last lap of his race, where he looks good, jumps in, boom, hard impact, and it's compiled with some ruts that get you going, and that's all she wrote. It happened to multiple riders. It's got nothing really to do with these guys' abilities. It's just them overriding the terrain. It does a better representation of what happened to Jett because we didn't really get it on camera, where it's just a hard impact, tripling in there in a quick bounce, boom, and just gets you off enough to almost rip the handlebars out of your arms. But see, there's Jett. Boom. And he's down on the ground. Luckily, the tough block might have hurt him there. And we'll go back to the first race here. But before I do, I want you to make your way over to CompleteRacingSolutions.com. Under his membership programs, he's got a new express training for guys that are designed for 30 minutes or less. You're still going to get everything that you need: functional training, programs for 3 levels, novice to advanced, membership discounts, webinars with himself. Make sure you go to CompleteRacingSolutions.com in his membership page. Back to race 1, where we are going to nickname Jett the running man, not the generational talent, but the running man. If you could crash that way every time, you would have a long career. What really happened here? It's not that his hole shot button was engaged or potentially that his body positioning was off. I really think what happened was that Malcolm and them touched just minutely, but when you're in the air or when you're not expecting it, it is enough to just throw you completely off in the other direction. And that's exactly what happens to Jett. Maybe you could argue that he overjumped this tabletop and it got him off-centered, but the way he responds in the next double, where he's moving completely over here to almost take out AP, really makes me critically think that it is touching Malcolm's front wheel with your rear wheel that threw this whole thing in motion. And it's very ironic that if AP wasn't there, he probably wouldn't have crashed to the same extent that Jason Anderson wouldn't have crashed if he didn't run into Justin Barcia. And last, that is a good segue into something else that I don't understand, is I don't understand how Sexton moved over on his old teammate, where he leaves the door open. Yeah, he's doing the nice road racing line by going outside in, but he didn't defend his position. He let up and just let Jett by, almost as if there was a pit board that said, let Jett by. But these guys are not on the same team anymore. They're racing for the championship. This is baffling to me that happened, which makes me feel, just at the beginning of the video, how Sexton didn't completely cover the line to Tomac makes me think that maybe Sexton's not gelling as much with this track or the motorcycle, but it's hard because he ended up winning the first race. So for somebody to have the confidence to go out there swinging and win that first race, and he was really my pick to win for this round, to just let off just makes me wonder. And it ultimately didn't matter because Jett ended up putting himself on his head. However, I cannot come up with an excuse as to how Sexton let this happen. It's very interesting to me, incredibly interesting.